So my name is Nishadi. I'm the Senior Technical Project Manager for BioFAIR, and welcome to the briefing webinar for the Methods Commons call. As you might have expected, this is a competitive call, and we've decided to run this as a closed webinar that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. So this just means that we can't see the participants can't see each other, and the Q&A also will be anonymous unless you decide to include your name in the text that you type. So please do type in your questions as we go along, and we'll try and get to as many of them as possible at the end of the webinar. So Tony, yeah, if you can advance slides. So this is what we're going to get into today in the next hour or so. Tony Bedette, the BioFAIR Director, will give us an introduction to the full Methods Commons call and what this means for you as applicants. And then we'll launch into some discussion and have some time for questions. There will be some time for closing remarks at the end as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Tony at this point, and I'll be back again at the end to field your questions.
Thanks, Nishadi, and hi everyone. Thanks for attending and thanks for your interest in BioFAIR so far. I'm going to give a quick outline to what BioFAIR is for those of you that are sort of newer to what we're trying to achieve with the BioFAIR program. So there's a little bit of background to start, and then I'm going to spend most of the sort of half an hour diving into the structure for the full proposals and the materials that we'll provide to support your application. But just to give you an outline, the sort of vision that we're working towards with BioFAIR is to try and get to this point where the UK's digital infrastructure puts answers to life sciences questions at researchers' fingertips through simple and efficient reuse of data and methods and through the expertise of their potential collaborators. So really thinking about trying to mesh together the services and tools and workflows and data around the UK and stitch it together in a way that enables researchers to answer questions much more easily. And FAIR is in our name, it's in the title. So a huge part of this initiative is about making data more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But it's not just data, it's absolutely about tools and especially workflows, and this is the focus for the Methods Commons call. So really thinking about how to create this kind of step change in UK life sciences research. We really want to try and streamline data reuse, and we think about doing that through four main pillars: maximizing fair and reproducible data and methods, widening the use of existing data, methods, and services, easing and streamlining collaboration. So encouraging researchers to go beyond just the silos of their organization or their projects that they work in right now and think about how to share data, share methods, and reuse solutions that are out there already, and really to bridge the gap between researchers and between the data sources at individual institutions and between existing data infrastructures and between software and tools that exist to support research in a way that really drives and increases the efficiency of research. So that's really how we're thinking about BioFAIR at the minute. There's five main objectives for BioFAIR as a project. I think most of you will know, but BioFAIR is a 5-year UKRI funded initiative. Backed at these five objectives, really to create culture change and drive adoption of FAIR principles, to defragment the UK's life science research landscape, thinking about how to increase and enhance its effectiveness, to democratize access to data and methods across the UK life sciences via national capabilities, to attract, develop and retain excellent research data management skills and build capacity for UK life sciences, and ultimately improving the efficiency of research and enabling new research by increasing the reuse of data and methods in the life sciences. So there are our five main objectives. As part of the Methods Commons, we hope that one of your teams will be able to come forward and really help us with this mission, especially the parts that focus on that are focused on the methods component. So this is thinking about how do we drive access to reuse of data methods? How do we make sure that workflows can be more effectively shared across researchers? So these sorts of things, and then thinking about all of these kind of components. In terms of structurally how we're trying to do this within BioFAIR, we're really thinking about three main big pieces of biocommons. We think about the data commons, which is about weaving data across the UK together. We think about the methods commons, which is the piece we're here to talk about today, about enabling institutes and research teams to access trusted, robust analysis platforms, tools, and workflows, and using their own and reference data. And then the people commons piece about about building a pool community of data stewards, research software engineers, those who can support data and software management planning. Obviously, here we're here to talk about the methods commons, but the interfaces to the data commons and the people commons are important things to think about and consider as part of your application. That we have a set of breakthrough goals for BioFAIR that we've been working to develop. These are a bit more specific. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but I included them because I think it's useful to think about sort of what's happening across the whole BioFAIR ecosystem. The sort of main driver here for the methods commons is this piece about the analysis platform. We're obviously looking to establish a BioFAIR platform for data analysis and workflow execution. That's one of the driver goals in the call and the expression of interest that we put forward. But there are other pieces here as well around building requirements, understanding the community of users and stakeholders, about building up champions within the community across the UK, about sharing data more effectively and sharing analysis, the results of workflows that are available from the BioFAIR platform, about building up a concierge service that helps to deliver a cutting edge help desk user support service, including through a strong website, and building up the operating framework for BioFAIR as a national capability, and that really means putting a strong collaboration network in place between us at the BioFAIR hub and the collaboration network delivery partners, what we call BioFAIR spokes. The methods commons is going to be the first BioFAIR spoke, so will have a role in helping us establish this network. And we put this together in a structural model that looks a little bit like this, with the BioFAIR hub at the center. The red boxes here are the commons and capabilities that we expect to establish through funding calls like this one. The methods commons going first. The green layer here is the services and things that the methods commons will and other commons will weave together as part of its fabric, and wrapping it all with both the concierge service that provides access and support to those services in the commons infrastructure, but also adopts and Pathfinder projects, which are sort of drivers of adoption of those services. And our Pathfinder projects are currently undergoing a peer review and will come on stream before the methods commons kicks off. So as the methods common starts, there'll be ready access to those Pathfinder projects to sort of partner up with them, explore their needs, and understand exactly what they might need from a methods common solution. So this is what we're really trying to build. We're trying to think about three commons, and two additional capabilities: the methods data people commons, and then we're sort of thinking about these two major capabilities as a portal and a knowledge hub that will grow and deliver over time. And we really think about delivering that across the full data lifecycle. So we want to think about how this runs from assay to insight, including the sort of data management planning that comes before you even start collecting data through assays. This is the data lifecycle diagram in the IDM kit, and we really want to think about how we use the BioFAIR structures to enable and support all aspects of that data management lifecycle. Methods commons are obviously focused on some of the computational aspects here, thinking about processing and analyzing the data, but it should have a sort of wider view on how it interfaces and supports other parts of this kind of assay to insight data journey. And the thing that we're using as sort of a North Star for BioFAIR is the Global Open Research Commons, the essential elements of the Global Open Research Commons model that's that's come out of an interest group of part of the Research Data Alliance is shown here. There's 9 essential elements, but in BioFAIR we're thinking very much about how we ensure that our commons has all of these essential elements. The methods commons is going to need to help us build up some of these, especially the sort of areas around services and tools, compute capacity, producing and consuming research objects, thinking very strongly about interoperability and standards. But I think the methods commons will also need to pay a little bit of attention to the other things that are happening in some of the call text. There's things about governance structures, especially, and rules of participation and access. So these things will have an impact on the methods commons as it goes forward, and we're trying to think about all 9 of these essential elements. And we are also within BioFAIR trying to adopt a team first approach. I very much like this team topologies model that focuses on designing for long lived, high performing teams rather than very much top down directive interventions. And some of that you will see in the documents that we're putting forward for this call is we're very much looking at establishing a collaborative relationship, establishing the methods commons as a team that can work with the rest of BioFAIR long term, rather than defining it as a fixed term project. You must deliver X, Y, Z, and then your funding is done. We're very much trying to think about how to build this into a collaborative relationship going forward, and then that will involve having defined relationships with other parts of BioFAIR. So, for example, we might want the methods commons. We want the methods commons team to create workflows as a service that can potentially be executed from the portal, and thinking about how we assimilate those sorts of things. So it's very much a sort of collaborative relationship that we're trying to build in a team first manner. We do have some governance procedures in place, and this is lifted from the BioFAIR business case about how BioFAIR governance processes work and then feed into UKRI as our ultimately as our funder. So we're thinking about the spokes at the minute. So that this call is to appoint the first BioFAIR spoke, which is shown on the bottom of this figure. Those spokes then report upwards ultimately into UKRI through a group that is the delivery team that will be convened as soon as the first spoke is formed. The delivery team is supported by the Research and Technical Advisory Group, or the RTAG for BioFAIR, and the Architecture Group. That both of those organisations are up and running already. The delivery team then feeds into the BioFAIR Hub, and from the BioFAIR Hub through up into the BioFAIR Project Board, which is chaired by the BioFAIR SRO, and that then reports up into UKRI governance structures. The spoke selection process shown on this diagram here is what we're here to discuss today. As part of your application, it will be put forward, and for recommendation as a recommendation for acceptance from the project board. So sign off here comes from the BioFAIR project board. Although we will put a recommendation forward after a peer review process that we'll explain in a second. So that's how the governance processes work. I want to talk now about how the full application is going to work. So first of all, who can apply? We took expressions of interest, and thank you for submitting them. We had expressions of interest from 3 consortia to deliver the entire methods commons, and we are going ahead and inviting all 3 of you to apply for to put in a full proposal. There is some matchmaking in progress. We took a look at the sort of structures and expressions of interest that we received, because we had 3 consortia putting in for the full methods commons, and 2 partial ones that didn't particularly overlap. We were having to do some matchmaking. You will have received some emails from me and from others in the BioFAIR hub. We can't take the partial expressions of interest forward unless they join forces with a full consortium. So we're trying to facilitate that behind the scenes. That's still ongoing. We haven't put a deadline on that yet, and from our side, I think it's fine to have some negotiations. We'll support and broker those. We obviously want to leave you time to make sure you can put a full application in. So we'll expedite that. We don't have an answer for that right now, but we'll keep talking about that as we go. Hopefully that's clear. If we can't figure out a way to sort of partner up anyone, unfortunately, the partial expressions of interest we'll have to drop out. Key dates for the call. We put the deadline on the website. We've tweaked it slightly, so we took expressions of interest on the 22nd, or opened up for expressions of interest on the 22nd of December. The deadline you will hit for the 19th of January. We've done the notification. This is the briefing event. We've moved the full proposal submission deadline back by a week. It's now the 4th of March. That's still quite tight to get the application in. We have a little bit of flexibility on the deadline. If you feel extensions will be needed, please let us know as soon as possible. I will go through some of the supporting documentation now. These are all going to go onto our website on Wednesday morning, so on the 28th of January. All of them, I will go through a little bit of the details now, but please read all the documents carefully. They should provide everything that you need for a strong application. We've tried to be as clear and as possible and give you as much information as we can to support your application. If you think there's something missing, please let us know, and we'll try and handle that and share it with all of the applicants in due course. There are basically two types of documents. One explaining the requirements, so how ultimately the funded partner will be required to work in BioFAIR. That includes the reporting guidelines and the governance structures I've just talked about. There's also some guidance documentation in there that includes information on how we sort of expect the methods commons to function, but they're things to consider as part of your application, as part of making a strong submission. So that includes some guidance on how we think BioFAIR should work, including things like team collaboration modes. There's also KPIs that you might wish to track, some examples of how we think that can align to the BioFAIR mission. But these are things that we're providing as guidance to support your application and things that you might want to tell us about. So they're the two sorts of documents. In terms of the materials that will be available, we are providing this set of things here. Again, they will all go on the website and you can read through them at your leisure from Wednesday. The first document is the functional specification that defines the architecture for the BioFAIR technical platform at the sort of functional level. It'll include all the requirements for the methods commons, but also include some of the stuff that's out of scope because it belongs to like the data commons or the people commons. I should say that this document, we expect that document to evolve. It's been written with lots of input from the BioFAIR architecture working group and the RTAG. I think we're currently at about a version 0.9. We'll publish it. It will evolve, and it will evolve in a managed way with sign off from the AWG and clearly can be clearly communicated to spokes in future. The delivery team organization structure that I just described a minute ago will be responsible for like communicating how those things change and assessing the impact on spokes as they go. So we sort of need a structure of engaged spokes before we can really start to evolve that properly. But we put it down as a sort of functional specification in terms of how we want the architecture for BioFAIR to work centrally. There's a section on incident response requirements in terms of how spokes should detect and assess and respond to incidents, including security or data breaches, these sorts of things. There's some spoke governance information, requirements about how to set up the spoke so that it can be fed into the reporting structure. There's stuff on team culture. We've talked about that a little bit already, ways of working, including this sort of team first approach. We provided some guidance on how you might want to structure your monitoring framework. I want to say here that there is a monitoring and evaluation task force across BioFAIR at the minute that is reviewing how to assess FAIR adoption and potentially provide input and recommendations on KPIs and service levels that should be in place for BioFAIR. So we'll ask that you as a Methods Commons applicant to propose your KPI framework. There's some examples in this document, but also you might want to consider how to respond and adapt as these things solidify and as we learn through the course of the five-year BioFAIR project. There's a document about how to structure your budget, which is setting out expectations for what the sort of line items that we need in the budget and what's allowed in terms of utilization of funds. There's a document on reporting requirements that sets out reporting requirements and cadence for the funded partner, including sort of having an eye on provisioning value for money. There is a long document on what the assessment criteria for this call are, the structure for your application and the assessment criteria, as well as the selection process that we'll use. And there's a very brief document about anticipating the role of AI in BioFAIR. BioFAIR doesn't currently have an AI strategy. We're working towards it. I think it's going to be woven into every aspect of BioFAIR. And as the spokes come on stream, we want lots of input from across the whole network about the ways in which AI is disrupting and improving the ways that we work. So there's some guidance on how we're currently thinking about it, but that's definitely a piece of work that's moving quite actively. Um, and I think there's a theme there of co-creation. So the documents that we're providing clearly represent our current thinking in BioFAIR and across the network, but we're including them to support your application. We expect lots of areas to evolve over time. So the functional specifications being refined, the KPI might get updated, the governance might need to evolve and as the project grows and scales. So in your application, you might want to consider how to make sure your team is a sort of active participant in that kind of agile development process, rather than just simply we'll name a person to sit on the delivery team, thinking about how you might respond to input and feedback from across the BioFAIR network might be useful to include in your application. In terms of structuring your application, we've laid it out like this. So we don't want you to have to redo anything that you put in your initial expression of interest. So you can essentially reuse those if you want. We have got criteria how we'll assess. So we're giving you the opportunity to update them if you feel that they don't already match. Um, so we're breaking down the structure for the application like this. So executive summary and vision and initial scope, you all provided in your expression of interest. We're asking for an additional sort of delivery strategy, which explains how you prioritize, how you expect to deliver value within a 2-year time frame, and then the approach, which will how you'll deliver that strategy that can include detailed work package descriptions, a Gantt chart, and you can build on what was provided in your vision and initial scope if you provided some of this already. We are looking at exemplar use cases. So we'd like you to explain how exemplar use cases might be used to drive and validate delivery. There's an opportunity here to plug into the Pathfinder projects and the fellowships that are coming through. So you don't have to come with fully formed exemplar use cases all already packaged into your application, but you might want to think about what sorts of things you are looking for within that aligns to your delivery strategy. So if there's particular types of workflows or particular scientific domains that you're interested in, you might explain how you would you might do some of that prioritization to work with some of those Pathfinder projects. If you have exemplar use cases that you want to support out of the box, they're great as well. And then thinking about your service delivery model. So this is very much about what parts of your teams deliver services, how they'll be organized, and especially what infrastructure they might need. So how you plan to deliver services across the sort of blend of hybrid infrastructure that might include institutional infrastructure, stuff that BioFAIR purchases and provides centrally, or commercial cloud. So think we use this section to describe exactly kind of what infrastructure you might need and who will interface with it. Another set of sections then think about evaluating impact. This is the place to think about what your KPI framework might be, the team management and governance. We already asked you for this in the expression of interest. This is slightly expanded from that, but please feel free to reuse the team and governance section that you had in your expression of interest if it still fits the brief. Community engagement is a piece here that we'd like to understand how much engagement you'll do with users and stakeholders, how that will be embedded throughout delivery, what needs you might have from the BioFAIR Hub or the BioFAIR Fellows to connect you, which parts of the community you might need to be connected with. Responsible delivery about ethical, legal, and security considerations. Trusted research here doesn't cover trusted research environments. Sensitive human data is kind of out of scope for BioFAIR, but thinking about how to make sure that you're handling data and building trust in BioFAIR as a network is an important aspect here. And then obviously the budget, as well as the justification of resources. Some of these, a brief explanation of that was in your expression of interest. This is your opportunity to expand out into the full application. So that's how to apply. That's what sort of we're asking you to provide to us. I think to reciprocate, this is the role that the BioFAIR Hub will play to support spokes throughout the project that get funded. Essentially, we're sort of distilling the BioFAIR Hub down to two main things. Support in terms of project oversight, stakeholder engagement, connections across the BioFAIR network, minimizing spoke management overheads. So supporting you through reporting up to UKRI, these sorts of things. We're trying to make the reporting structures as simple and as automated as possible so that the BioFAIR hub can do the reporting. We don't have to ask you for long, complicated reports all the time. And then secondly, delivery of foundational technical services. That includes infrastructure procurement and things like single sign-on to minimize any impediments to spokes. We're really trying to make sure spokes can focus on delivering the services that they're experts in, not have to build up a huge amount of sort of foundational infrastructural capabilities. We'll try and support as much of that as we can within the hub. That's going to be an ongoing collaboration and a little bit of a moving target. So a little bit of flexibility there is quite important. The procurement I'll talk about more about in a second. In practice, that means that the BioFAIR hub will support spokes in terms of making connections within BioFAIR, connecting to like external user groups and external communities, supporting some of the stakeholder engagement. We have a central BioFAIR stakeholder engagement strategy that we can support spokes as part of that are funded and support their adoption of that strategy. We can support some of the project management and reporting through UKRI, and we can help with procurement of infrastructure. The provision obviously needs to be a collaboration. When we need to understand what services what infrastructure you will need. We can support the procurement of that. This is a bit of a flexible model, and again, I'll talk about this in a second. And really thinking about delivering shared services that are required across all the spokes, so single sign-on. That is something that we know evolves in tandem. So we're sort of trying to avoid really tightly coupled dependencies here. So there's a little bit of thinking that I think all of our spokes will have to do about how to recognize that things are out of scope, but work around it in sort of the meantime or in terms of delivering an MVP. So, if you can deliver an MVP that doesn't require sign on, then that might be advantageous. We sort of need to evolve those things in tandem, and we're still building capacity to deliver some of these services in the hub as well. So bear that in mind. I thought it's useful just at a very high level to include a timeline of the sort of 12 months that are ahead. Um, the BioFAIR fellows, in terms of supporting sort of community connections, came on board in October last year, so they're already in place. The BioFAIR Pathfinder projects are undergoing a peer review process at the minute. We expect those to start possibly around the beginning of March or April. The Methods Commons is obviously coming up now, and we're obviously looking at your timelines, but sort of an MVP that was on stream early in the proposal would be quite advantageous. It's listed here as sort of mid 2026, but obviously that's not very far away now. We'll see how we do. Then we're thinking about sort of building up training modules. Some of those will come through the fellows. Some of those will come through the People Commons program as we build up and staff up our training capacity. So there's some potential integrations there between the Methods Commons services and training. And then we're hoping that the Data Commons will be funded later this year, maybe getting towards a Data Commons MVP towards the end of 2026. So there's opportunities for sort of integration and interaction between Methods Commons and those services as we come on stream. However, we want to try and avoid these really tight dependencies and tight coupling. So planning within your application about what to do in the meantime is valuable. And just final comments before we move on to the Q&A part. What we're really looking for is for you to tell us how best to operate the Methods Commons at UK national scale. You're the experts, not us. We've thought quite deeply about what the objectives of BioFAIR is and sort of the right ways to approach this. But in terms of service delivery and running these things, you're the expert, so we want your input here. We're really trying to create this kind of co-creation model. But in that spirit, BioFAIR, we kind of aspire to be agile. We know these spokes are probably going to be quite heavily DevOps projects. There's development work to do, but a lot of it's about operating services and connecting them together. We've been as specific as we can be, but in the DevOps spirit, we want to be lean, we want to be agile, we want to plan for evolution and co-creation. Um, that makes is much easier if we plan for early demonstration of value. So strongly encourage you to think um, about how to demonstrate value early in your application. So simple services that do one or two things well are better than a sort of big bang delivery of the full spec that's going to take a long time to deliver. Showing some value and building engagement, even if it's very manual, is really good. We have some of the manual structures in place to support some of that. We can work with Pathfinder projects, we can work with fellows to put these things together. So giving them one or two services that optimize a narrow part of that whole research data management journey, very valuable. And I alluded to this a couple of times, but infrastructure procurement and provisioning across the UK DRI landscape's a complex thing, especially when it comes to consideration of cloud resources. It's evolving as we go. BioFair's in a relatively new space in terms of we're not a big centralized digital research infrastructure that can buy lots of kit and employ the teams to run it. We're trying to do this through a very collaborative model, but this is also a sort of slightly unusual operating model for UKRI in terms of infrastructure provision. So in terms of buying kit, and whether that's owned by BioFAIR or partner organizations in terms of purchasing cloud credits. There's lots of nuance that we're working through with UKRI at the minute. So just bear in mind that we are trying to be as clear and as transparent with you, and it's useful to get really clear guidelines from you as partners as to how you would like this to work, but it is going to be a sort of negotiation that we will work our way through together. And I'll stop there for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you to all of you who've been typing in your questions in the Q&A box. We were also sent some questions by email. So I am now going to try to combine the questions that have been asked in the Q&A with the questions that were pre-sent. And if I don't do a good job at this, please scream at me on the Q&A chat. We will be recording all the questions and keeping a list so that in case we don't get to anything by the end of this webinar, we will get back to you offline for sure. So Tony, I guess we can start with the first 2 years of the Methods Commons. So one of the questions that we had pre-submitted was, what is the scope of the Methods Commons for in the first 2 years, especially given the absence of a portal or the data commons? And can I also tag on, someone's asked in the Q&A chat, will there be a timetable of delivery of the architectural components? So I imagine this is sort of, what is your vision for the 2 years?
Yeah. I'll try and get onto the second part as well. So in terms of the 2 years, so I think the way to plan, given that Methods Commons is going to be the first spoke, it is going first, and there isn't a portal or a data commons. I think the Methods Commons can aim to provide direct value to users, direct user facing services. You might need to narrow the user group, right? So think about people who are used to coding against APIs or existing workflow experts that know how Galaxy or Nextflow works already, and so that they can build upon or incorporate um, the sort of the methods commons aspects, the slightly more fundamental methods commons aspect first, and then do that in such a way that they're standardized and can be built upon or incorporated into portal services later. So really thinking about, is there a set of APIs? Is there programmatic interfaces that we can provide? Yes, they can be incorporated into in the methods commons functions can be incorporated into the portal later. These sorts of ways of thinking about it. So within, given the portal and data commons is absent, thinking about sort of slightly narrower set of features that support a dedicated set of users. So you like to be able to integrate the methods commons with the data commons, so data sets are pulled straight out in very standardized ways, but you could imagine working with one particular domain or one particular Pathfinder project that already have their data quite well formatted in one particular repository that adopts the standards that the methods commons would want. So thinking about narrowing a little bit to demonstrate value early, and then backloading some of the complexity of integrating with later services later into the proposal could work. I also think it's important to think about standards. So with the functional specification and the AWG are thinking very hard about um, making sure we've got very clearly defined standards at boundaries. So, for example, that's thinking like the boundary between the data commons and the methods commons. We'll use defined RO crate profiles. So, making sure that you've got an example of a place where the methods commons can pick up a RO crate profile and push it into an execution of a pipeline primes for integration with the data commons later. And the advantage, of course, of being the first spoke is you get a bit of a say on driving those standards forward and making sure that they work within the methods commons, and then sort of the data commons will have to sort of adopt some of those standards a little bit later. So it's an advantage. It's a blessing and a curse to go first. There's a little bit of planning and a little bit of working around the corners that needs to happen to sort of mock up or stub out things like that might exist for the data commons later. But you also get some freedom to define some of the standards that will then get solidified later as the data commons components comes on stream. And we do expect to support lots of manual integration in the short to medium term. So whether that's through fellows or Pathfinder projects, working around the absence of things like the data commons or the portal, that's okay. We'll expand that up as we go. And the other point here is about trying to avoid tight coupling. And that's to mitigate the challenges of working in this distributed model. So, and this touches on the sort of timeline of delivery schedule. So rather than set a firm deadline for the data commons that may well sail past, I think we're sort of trying to create expectations and agreements about how the standards work. So the data commons can work to build up to adopt a standard. The methods commons can work to that standard as well, and that tries to avoid tight coupling so that the data commons can be integrated when it's ready. That's obviously a sort of slightly utopian view of things. We'll need some test cases and some edge cases. In the meantime, the delivery team will work on those as the structure to make sure these kind of integrations come together, but avoiding this kind of tight coupling and focusing on standards implementation is the way that we expect it to go. Hopefully, I've answered that question, but please let me know in the Q&A if there's more I can build
on. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am now going to move to the next question that we got through email, which was about the hub and spokes and the dev teams. How will the spoke engage with the hub and the dev teams for key components, such as LS login and the portal?
Yep. So again, building on my previous answer, that's actually via the BioFAIR delivery team. That'll be the first sort of implementation of the delivery team when the methods commons comes online. We're trying to do that via dedicated provision services and APIs. So, at this point, we'll make sure that the point at which things like single sign-on comes online, we'll try to ensure that there is identity as a service as an available API for spokes to take advantage of, test and integrate. And we'll try and make sure that all of those services have service level objectives around them that we will iterate on as we go. That's an important part of why the KPI framework's in for the methods commons. Other dev teams will have those kind of reciprocal arrangements in place as well. We don't expect to have service level objectives for everything on day one. So we will work through these together. One of the things that the delivery team will look at quite early is what the KPIs KPIs are for the respective services, and we'll take an approach of looking at sort of sensible error budgets and defining SLOs with respect to those. The hub chairs those delivery meetings, so we'll try to make sure that everyone's responsibilities are clear. Architecture working group will approve the interoperability standards, and that the delivery team's sort of the decision making group for uh, making sure that the key components are represented appropriately.
Brilliant, thank you. The questions are coming in quite quick. I might just ask you a quick one here, which is, should we be inspired by existing cloud-based workflow platforms, example, Terra, Illumina, BaseSpace, so on, in terms of functionality, user admin, cost tracking, etc.?
Yeah, I think you can be. I think there's lots of good stuff that's happened out there. There's also some slightly less good stuff in terms of interoperability. I think picking out the stuff that's worked really well from other solutions, absolutely be inspired by that. We can think about incorporating and integrating some of that as well. So LS login was specifically called out in the previous question. So, thinking about how we work with services that already exist, whether we need to assimilate them into the methods commons. It's a commons, not a re-implementation. So potentially we could think about incorporating some of these or being interoperable with them using the same standard stack. So absolutely be inspired by stuff that's already out there. I think that's a very good way to go. As I said in the sort of final remarks, I think the people on this call are the experts in this area, and way more than me or others in the hub team. So yeah, for sure, bring in all of that experience and expertise.
Brilliant. I'm also going to bunch together a couple of questions that have come in the QA, which is about healthcare clinical data processing. Are these within scope or out of scope for users of BioFAIR?
Yeah, good question, and this is a tricky one. So um, BioFAIR, the first 5-year funding program for BioFAIR rules sensitive data, clinical data out of scope, um, because it's well served by healthcare initiatives and secure data initiatives elsewhere, like HDR UK and DARE UK. These programs support sensitive data. So sensitive data is out of scope for BioFAIR, and that was done to avoid BioFAIR needing to solve all of the same problems that are being solved elsewhere in terms of developing trusted research environments and secure data environments. If you flip the coin there and rather than think about what we need to build up and what the users need, the researcher questions often run across healthcare or clinical data into open data, reference data, or model organism data. So I think it's important that we think within the methods commons, we think about the interoperability questions. How can I make sure that this workflow can run and produce outputs that are compatible with outputs that might be coming from similar workflows in the healthcare domain or in clinical space or in a trusted research environment. But we shouldn't be optimizing to deliver services that can run in TREs. That's a bonus, but it's not a priority for BioFAIR.
Indeed. Thank you for that. There are some questions on the matchmaking process, but before that, Tony, can we go to your next slide? Because
Yeah.
I think it's important to cover these questions as well that have come in. How will the procurement provisioning division work?
Yeah, so we are working, yeah, this is a complicated one. So we're working on a model where the hub's responsible for procurement, like purchasing of services, purchasing of infrastructure, potentially purchasing of hardware, and purchasing of cloud credits. So actually, the procurement is the responsibility of the hub. But in terms of provisioning infrastructure, like do you need VMs, do you need GPUs, how much storage do you need, these sorts of things, we need those to come from the spokes. We can do some back of the envelope calculations, and we have an allocated budget on the basis of that. But we kind of need to understand what the spokes' really need to deliver their services. And I guess the spokes will learn, and this will evolve over time, depending on the success of the initiative. The more users we have, the more compute we're going to need, these sorts of things. So we're working on this model where procurement's the responsibility of the hub. Provisioning will essentially be the responsibility of the spokes. But we hope that that will go through defined platform as a service, infrastructure as a service offerings from the hub. But it's going to take some time to bed that in properly. So this is why we asked questions about sort of what infrastructure you might need, what commercial cloud you might need in the expression of interest, and why we're asking you to build on that in the current proposal to make sure this works. I'll carry straight onto the cloud billing as well because it's sort of related. For cloud and commercial cloud, what we're hoping is that the billing for that will be handled by the BioFAIR hub in a transparent way. So the hub and the spokes will get cost alerts and be able to see the dashboards of how much they're spending. The spokes obviously have a vital role in engineering their services and operating them to make sure that they're providing cost efficiency and and value for money. We would strongly encourage you to include KPIs on this. So thinking, how much does it cost to run a workflow? Or on average, what's the typical workflow execution cost? Maybe in a range. These sorts of things. So we're evaluating the best way to handle billing. If you've got input on models that have worked effectively for you in the past in the services that you've delivered, we're welcome to hear that. We are still working with UKRI as well on what the appropriate way to do procurement is. So that's a complicated answer, and there's lots of moving pieces here. But to try and distill that down, what we'd like, especially for cloud billing, is essentially to block purchase, collectively purchase cloud credits through the BioFAIR hub via an agreement with commercial cloud providers, and then allocate that as part of the spokes. So that, essentially, will part of your budget will be ring fenced for cloud credits, basically, that will have been procured through the BioFAIR hub. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. This is something that we're trying to work our way through and fulfill UKRI requirements about appropriate like tendering and procurement of large infrastructure purchases. So I appreciate there's some uncertainty here. This is something that I think that in the initial startup phase of the methods commons, we're going to have lots of delivery team conversations about.
Fabulous, Tony. I'd like to go to some of the questions on the matchmaking process. Now, I realize you're going to have to skip down to your slide 31, if that's okay.
Yep.
The question one, the first question that's coming through the chat, and you can perhaps combine it with what you've got on your slide, is whether teams are able to broker with full expressions of interest. And if they are, how would they do that? So this is a full consortium providing the full set of functionality with another such group.
Yeah, okay. So we based on our review that we did, the opportunities for that look sparse. So it's not impossible to do that, but our appraisal of the expressions of interest that we got was that matchmaking between two full consortia would be pretty tough based on where the budget was going. It was very difficult to see how the two teams could be blended into one at the price point without cutting huge amounts of stuff out. I think if that's of interest, we can look again. Our assumption was that this would end up being a three-way competitive call between the expressions of interests, between the three groups that submitted a full expression of interest. Potentially, they could be partnered with the partial groups, and we've been working on brokering that agreement. I think if if any of you are interested in sort of broadening that discussion, let us know and we can facilitate.
Indeed, thank you. There is a question that has come in, and I'm not sure if I have interpreted this correctly, so forgive me if I've done a bad job. I think the question is, if a partial group joins a full group, how much will the funding be?
Yeah, so yeah, it's the same. So with a partial grid, so the so what the budget is 4 million over 2 years. That's the ceiling budget for a single full proposal. So and that budget has been agreed with the project board. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room on it. So I think the answer is the the full proposal has to stick within the 4 million budget over 2 years. Hopefully, I'll
Yeah.
answer that clearly.
Brilliant, thank you. There was also a question about how many consortia will be funded, and I
It's
believe
a single one.
yes, yes. Oh, it's one, yes. I would like, if possible, to go to slide 30 and discuss help desk. So we had a pre-submitted question on this, and the question was, who will operate the help desk, and to what extent are we to cover training within the spoke versus training in the people and knowledge hubs. To add to that, someone in the chat has also asked, are they able to use existing resources from BioFAIR where appropriate when it comes to providing a service desk?
Uh, yeah, I think yes. So yeah, I think that question's clear. Please correct me if I don't answer it fully. Um, so I think essentially we are in terms of the help desk, we expect that the help desk and the concierge functions, these are things that we expect to grow, and we expect them to be very manual at the start of the project. Lots of conversations, lots of manual support, lots of hand holding into something that's much more systematic or automated or full featured, if you like, over the course of the project. And you can envisage, and some of you may have heard me talk about this kind of vision for fully trained AI model or a chat GPT style support for concierge for functions for research data management. And, that's a bit science fiction, but not that crazy. So we expect this to grow as we go over time. So we think it's going to be quite manual. We think in the short term, certainly in the next year, that most of those kind of help desk requests or support functions will come through and be supported by the BioFAIR Hub, BioFAIR Fellows, particularly, or dedicated personnel within Pathfinder projects for things that particularly pertain to the Pathfinder project. Where they're specifically about workflow and need additional workflow expertise, having some in-house capacity for expert support, it'd be desirable, valuable, but the methods commons here is about this call is about making sure that the services and are available and have the desired impact. So, I think the how much support versus how much service delivery is needed. I don't think I have a really good answer for that right now. I think you as sort of the experts in this area might know a little bit better than me. I think, you know, I think there's a good argument for having some in-house support capacity, but it won't necessarily be frontline, right? It will be so we expect help desk requests to come in, be triaged by the BioFAIR Hub, BioFAIR Fellows, and then actually bring in Commons experts as needed, rather than necessarily on the front line. And likewise, that's the same sort of for training. We'll build up training capacity. We'll build up a training strategy and a training program. That'll be co-designed by the BioFAIR Hub and the People Commons, and that will grow as well. And then being able to bring experts from the Methods Commons in who maybe have done training in the past or have run training courses or have written training materials, again, really, really valuable. So I think it's something that we'd like you to cover. It doesn't necessarily have to be the priority, and it can be supported elsewhere, including through the fellowship program. So I guess the question about can we bring in extra resources from the BioFAIR project elsewhere is touching on that idea of like, can some of the support come through BioFAIR Fellows? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. Brilliant, Tony. I realize we have just a few minutes left. So might I suggest we turn to, we leave your slide on the question about license and support offerings, while I throw a couple of questions that have come in the Q&A at you.
Okay.
So there was a brief comment by someone saying KPI or OKR, question mark.
Hmm.
So if you had any thoughts, or if you want to elaborate, whoever asked the question, you can also ask us by email.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
good
yeah,
question. Relative merits. Trying
indeed.
to avoid getting stuck on that. What we provided guidance on was we gave some example key performance indicators that you could use to assimilate into a KPI framework. I think OKRs are great. I use them quite a lot myself as well. And they're great for looking at project delivery. One of the things that we're interested in though is about um, a, is about automating and streamlining as much reporting as possible. So rather than necessarily have to ask you to report on your objectives and demonstrate impact in a written report, actually, if you can turn some of those things into metrics that are measurable indicators through a dashboard that has a set of KPIs as part of it, we can automate as much of the reporting up to UKRI through that as possible. That would be great. So there's a role for both KPIs and OKRs, and actually we're asking you as applicants to suggest your own KPI framework. We've included some examples, but please feel free to suggest your own as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony. And there was a quick question slash comment of, is there no point then in brokering? I suspect this is to do with funding. And it's a tough one to answer because I'm only going to give you 30 seconds. If you had any thoughts.
I think it's really hard to broker between the full applications. I think there's a role for some negotiation within the partial ones that could potentially partner with the full applications. I don't think I when I looked at this, and I happy to take input from my colleagues in the hub as well. When we looked at this, it seemed very difficult to broker between the two full applicants. Um,
Yeah.
at the budget that's available. I what I would say is that I think there's a role for expanding out some of the offerings in future, and we may be able to look at whether there's room in the budget in future years for BioFAIR to sort of bring in additional partners into the future. Right now, given the situation sort of where we're at right now, and the fact that we've got to get lots of the spokes funded, some of which will then need lots of funding. I think there's not, we don't have the overhead and the approval from the project board right now to expand the budget for this call out to bring in extra partners. Um,
Thank you for clarifying that. We have gotten through as many of them as possible. Thank you very much. We did get asked a question on hiring new people and whether it was used some of the budget and the time in the initial phase to plan all of this out. And I think, Tony, if in your last slide, which 31, you do say, we do say, yes, this is acceptable.
yeah, there's a few simple answers here. Yeah, yes to hiring and contracting on a short time frame.
Brilliant. So I hope that has been useful. If you have any further questions, please do get in touch. Thank you very much, Tony.
I think, Nishadi, a final
Yeah,
observation, have a read of the documentation that we put up
indeed.
on Wednesday. And we don't currently have a scheduled follow-up Q&A,
Mhm.
but please let us know if there's things that aren't clear and you'd like the opportunity to ask about, because we can put a Q&A webinar in for next week or the week after as you go forward preparing your full applications to address any emerging questions.
Indeed. So please do be in touch and let us know. Thank you to my colleagues who've been fielding questions, and thank you to all of you for giving us an hour of your time. And do be looking out on our website for the supporting documentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.